Hello, and welcome to UK Paranormal Files. This is Bulletin episode number 2, and in the Bulletin episodes we deviate away from looking at a single topic or case and look instead at a few different articles or posts that I've seen lately and want to share with you. Let's get right into it, and for the first topic today, there's actually a few different articles I want to take a look at, and starting with this one on NBCnews.com, and this one is entitled "Aliens Are Out There, but a new study suggests they're more rare than we think." The research has raised eyebrows because it suggests humans are not extraordinarily special, despite the fact that the galaxy is stuffed with planets. According to a new analysis from scientists at the University of Nottingham in England, we don't have a lot of alien company. On June 15th, 2 researchers published a paper in the Astrophysical Journal arguing that the Milky Way, which sports an estimated several hundred billion stars, could host as few as 36 alien societies. That's a surprisingly tiny number, although the authors make a second, more generous analysis in which they say that the count might be as many as 1,000. Either way, their conclusion is that, like stick-shift cars, extraterrestrial civilizations are few and far between. Unfortunately for the author, stick-shift cars are the normal in the UK, and they may be in the country you're watching from. Not a great analogy, but I'll carry on. The implication is that our nearest cosmic chums are at least several thousand light years away. You may wonder why this story has raised eyebrows. Well, it would make Homo sapiens extraordinarily special, despite the fact that the galaxy is stuffed with planets. It discomfits scientists, including the author, because historically, every time we thought we occupy a privileged position in the universe, we were wrong. Remember that 6 centuries ago, learned folk would have assured you that the Earth was the centre of the cosmos. How did the British experts arrive at such a stunningly low estimate? After all, there have been enough previous studies on this topic to fill a small hoard of hard drives. Astronomer Carl Sagan figured that the Milky Way houses 1 million societies. A more conservative claim is that the number is closer to 10,000. So why do these Brits disagree? The scientists arrived at their lowball tally by using a variant of the Drake equation, everyone's favourite method to gauge alien headcounts. This famous formula, which was introduced by astronomer Frank Drake in 1961, is a string of 7 parameters that, when multiplied together, estimate the number of technologically adept societies in our galaxy. The parameters include the abundance of Earth-like planets, the fraction that spawn life, etc., etc. However, there is one term in this equation that generates a lot of debate because it's exclusively sociological. It's the length of time that a technological civilization maintains its mojo and beams radio or light waves into space. That's important because if an alien culture goes silent, we may never find it. In estimating the lifetime of a technological species, the paper's authors make a big assumption. They note that humans have been beaming signals into the ether for about a century. That's fair enough. But then they invoke something they've coined the astrobiological Copernican principle, which others modestly call the principle of mediocrity, and say that the universe is engaged in a massive Simon Says game. Whatever we on Earth have done, the rest of the universe has imitated perfectly. So because we've had radio for about 100 years, the Nottingham duo assume that all technological cultures will use this technology for a century. But then they'll stop and radio will go the way of the buggy whip. Radar, broadcast television, Wi-Fi, all these uses for radio will disappear, and the aliens will move on to some other, unspecified technology. You might not have any problem with that assumption. After all, we don't know how long radio technology will last here on Earth, so it's tempting to take our own experience, which extends for just a century, and apply it to everyone. But that's dicey. Would you say that because we've had aeroplanes for 100 years, the aliens will have aeroplanes for a century and not longer? Radio is a very useful technology based on some fundamental physics. It might be around for as long as the wheel. So it would certainly be reasonable to guess that the technological lifetime of societies is 10,000 years, not 100. Choosing the larger number increases the tally of inhabited worlds by 100 times, and I think that's in reference to the equation. In other words, this arbitrary assumption that the use of radio is short-lived is largely responsible for the author's unusually low estimate for the number of alien societies. But wait, there's more. A second premise in the Nottingham paper is equally astonishing, namely that every Earth-sized planet with a temperate climate will produce life, and after about 4 or 5 billion years, intelligent life will appear. Now, of course, most scientists agree with the obvious, that Earth-like planets can spontaneously generate living organisms, and some worlds will eventually spawn an intelligent species. But surely not all such worlds will do so. That's like saying every kid who takes piano lessons will inevitably win the Van Cliburn Prize. The Nottingham paper has drawn a lot of attention because it claims that the number of inhabited worlds is likely paltry. But in fact, by making your own assumptions, you can derive just about any estimate for the number of intelligent cosmic species. For myself, the author, I figure that an absolute minimum would be 70, the number that managed to bag speaking roles in Star Trek. Even that total would beat the lower limit published in this paper. And it's noted there that the author, Seth Shostak, is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California. Okay, I want to jump over now to another article entitled Extraterrestrial Alert, 737 Places Where Aliens Might Be Hiding, and this is on geneticliteracyproject.org. The Exotica catalogue was put together by researchers from Breakthrough Listen, a decade-long programme seeking to find signs of intelligent life in the universe. It ambitiously includes one of everything in astronomy. Incredibly, the catalogue lists over 700 distinct targets ranging from asteroids, comets, and planets through to pulsars, galaxies, nebulae, and star clusters. The point of the catalogue is to, quote, expand the diversity of targets surveyed in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Various classification schemes have been attempted before, but nothing on this scale. In total, astronomer Brian Lackey and his colleagues identified 737 distinct astronomical objects, some very well understood and others in desperate need of scientific attention. The Exotica catalogue further signifies the ongoing shift away from traditional SETI strategies in which scientists search for familiar alien signals such as radio emissions, and the shift towards Dysonian SETI, in which scientists look for extraterrestrial technosignatures, that is, signs of alien technology, stuff like Dyson shells, industrial waste, gigantic space habitats, beacons, and things we can't even imagine. A driving motivation for Lackey when compiling this catalogue was the idea that some alien intelligences might be exceptionally different from us, and by consequence, we're looking for them in the wrong places. That article made mention of Dysonian SETI, which is a reference to Freeman Dyson. I just want to jump to his Wikipedia page and quickly look at the section on the Dyson sphere. I know many of you may well be aware of Freeman Dyson and Dyson spheres, but some of you may not, so we'll just cover it briefly. In 1960, Dyson wrote a short paper for the journal Science titled Search for Artificial Stellar Sources of Infrared Radiation. In it, he speculated that a technologically advanced extraterrestrial civilization might surround its native star with artificial structures to maximise the capture of the star's energy. Eventually, the civilization would enclose the star, intercepting electromagnetic radiation with wavelengths from visible light downward and radiating waste heat outwards as infrared radiation. One method of searching for extraterrestrial civilizations would be to look for large objects radiating in the infrared range of the electromagnetic spectrum. Quote, "One should expect that, within a few thousand years of its entering the stage of industrial development, any intelligent species should be found occupying an artificial biosphere which surrounds its parent star." Dyson conceived that such structures would be clouds of asteroid-sized space habitats, though science fiction writers have preferred a solid structure. Either way, such an artifact is often called a Dyson sphere, although Dyson used the term shell. Dyson said he used the term artificial biosphere in the article to mean a habitat, not a shape. The general concept of such an energy transferring shell had been advanced decades earlier by Olaf Stapledon in his 1937 novel Star Maker, a source Dyson credited publicly. I remember seeing an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where they featured a Dyson sphere, so I'm sure other sci-fi writers will have borrowed this idea as well. There is one more article to look at on this topic, but the reason I've shared these is I think it's interesting that there is at least a conversation going on about SETI and the strategy that's being employed. In retrospect, it seems to me that the assumption that we should be looking for radio signals does now start to look like a flawed one. It seems to me, and it's just my opinion, that radio technology will likely be superseded before our civilization sets out for the stars. So it seems to me that if an alien civilization did develop radio technology similar or the same as we have, they probably too superseded that technology before they started to explore the galaxy properly and in craft. And if we're going to find them, and if we're serious about finding them in this pursuit, we probably do need to have a rethink about the strategy. The second article makes mention of Dysonian SETI, i.e. instead of looking for those radio signals, we should be looking out for the output of technology that they're more likely to be using. However, the Dyson sphere itself is 1960s thinking, if not earlier, and I'm not sure that that is necessarily the specific thing we now need to be looking for. So the question then becomes, if not this, then what should we be looking out for? Which leads me to the next article. This is thenextweb.com, and the article is entitled How Aliens Could Use Black Holes to Power an Intergalactic Civilization. Remember when I warned everyone that humans would probably destroy all life in the universe, like construction workers killing ant colonies to make way for a never-ending series of cosmic strip malls? A team of researchers from the School of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Glasgow in Scotland has me concerned that we might not be the construction workers in that analogy. One of the people working on the original atomic bomb project at Los Alamos, an Italian scientist named Enrico Fermi, came up with a mathematical solution explaining that if aliens really did exist, we would have seen them by now. It's called the Fermi paradox, and it can be summed up as follows. If the universe is infinite, where are all the aliens? Alexander Berezin, a researcher from the National Research University of Electronic Technology in Russia, came up with a pretty cool solution. The aliens are probably all over the place, but none of them are as advanced as we are. Since we're still here and we haven't seen any evidence of aliens, we must be in first place in the quest to become an intergalactic species. Unfortunately, that doesn't bode well for all the less advanced life forms out there, because if they aren't holding up signs that say, "Intelligent life here, please don't destroy us to power your giant spaceships," we'll probably destroy them to power our giant spaceships. The University of Glasgow team came up with an experiment to demonstrate a 50-year-old theory that Stephen Hawking's longtime research partner Roger Penrose thought up. He suggested that black holes could be exploited as perpetual energy sources. The theory says we could use black holes as a massive power source. If we could place an object at the edge of a black hole at the perfect position where it would be forced to move at the speed of light to remain still, it would create a negative energy force where the intersection occurred. This is cool because it means we could spend a little energy to toss something into a black hole and get even more energy in return. A couple of years later, a physicist, whose name I shan't try and pronounce, proposed an experiment capable of proving Penrose's theory. The physicist figured if we could spin a metal cylinder fast enough and then fire a light at it, the light would reflect with more energy than it struck the cylinder with. Unfortunately, this experiment, like Penrose's theory, relied on technology that doesn't exist by human standards. Penrose surmised that some far-off advanced alien civilization could use their strange technology to deliver objects to the edge of black holes, and the experiment would require that the metal cylinder to spin at more than 1 billion rotations per second, something impossible by modern engineering capabilities. And that brings us to the Glasgow team. They figured that if light reflecting off a spinning cylinder could confirm the negative energy theory, then why not sound? According to their research paper, in 1971, it was predicted that quantum fluctuations and classical waves reflected from a rotating absorbing cylinder will gain energy and be amplified. This concept, which is a key step towards the understanding that black holes may amplify quantum fluctuations, has not been verified experimentally owing to the challenging experimental requirement that the cylinder rotation rate must be larger than the incoming wave frequency. Here we demonstrate experimentally that these conditions can be satisfied with acoustic waves. We show that low-frequency acoustic modes with orbital angular momentum are transmitted through an absorbing rotating disk and amplified by up to 30% or more when the disk rotation rate satisfies the predicted condition. The implications for this research are nearly unfathomable. Is there any way to exploit this measurable energy gain using audio waves with current technology? Are we starting to pick up the trail that may centuries from now lead to a perpetual motion machine? But it also indicates an existential threat to humanity. If Berezin is correct, it means there either is now or one day will be a civilization capable of destroying all life. Perhaps it's us. All this exciting science leads me to believe we'll one day be feeding entire star systems to black holes as a means to power the exploration of a universe that's apparently infinite. That kind of expansion calls for a lot of anthills to be destroyed by a lot of construction workers. Let's hope Berezin's right about our place in this race, because if he isn't, and there's more intelligent life out there than us, we might be the ants. So returning to the previous conversation, is it black hole technology, Dyson spheres, or something else that's powering alien civilizations? This is where we need our theoretical physicists and our science fiction writers to really contemplate and dream up exactly how such advanced technology would work. Because then we might be able to understand what it is we should be looking for. For example, scientists searching for planets orbiting off faraway stars look for two things. They look for a star that's wobbling, which indicates that large bodies are in its gravitational orbit, and they look for slight drops in the brightness of the star, because that indicates the occasional passing of planets in that orbit between us and that particular star. So if we can conceive of how advanced power systems would work and their technology, we can then perhaps start to understand what it is that we should be looking for. And my contention would be, it wouldn't be radio signals. This is perhaps where people like Bob Lazar come in. Now, I know Bob Lazar is a very contentious figure and not everyone believes his story, but Bob says he and other scientists worked on off-world craft, and that these craft use a propulsion system which alters gravity and is fueled by a stable supply of element 115. Now, element 115 is highly unstable, and only a few molecules have ever been created in particle accelerators, here on Earth at least, which only existed themselves for a few seconds. It is thought that eventually we might be able to understand the correct isotopes for creating stable element 115 and other heavier elements, and that there is a chance that one day we'll have a stable sample, though no one really knows how long that might take for us to understand how to do this. But in the meantime, we might start to understand the conditions that may be needed to either manufacture or how or where element 115 might be found in our universe. All of this is of course assuming that technology, or such technology as element 115 as the fuel for gravity altering device or gravity manipulating device, is deemed feasible by our best physicists. And then on this narrow thread, we also then potentially face a paradox. And that is that if element 115 is deemed by our best scientists to be a sensible pathway towards gravitational propulsion, or the manipulation of gravity as a form of propulsion, and that then we decide that that's what SETI should be looking for, or could possibly be looking for, we're in the paradox that then does that then confirm that humanity has already been studying the alien technology? And then as such, is the SETI program even worth doing, or does it then become redundant? And there's another question, of course, as to whether or not aliens want to be found at all, or let alone monitored. And as such, is it a good idea at all to be sending signals out and listening into the universe? If we look at history, and if we look at well-documented cases of alien interaction and abduction, is there not a case already that the place we should be looking for aliens is right here on Earth? And should we not examine these testimonies of people that have had encounters and look at the clues in history to try and uncover who or what has been visiting Earth? And like the Fermi paradox suggests, if alien civilizations are out there and they have the technology to traverse the stars, they should have found us by now, right? Anyway, let's move along to the next article. So this article is on bbc.co.uk and it's called The Werewolf of Dogdyke, and it was sent to me by Kelly Shaw, who is a friend of the channel and a subscriber and a regular commenter. So thank you, Kelly, for all your wonderful positive comments and for taking the time to share this link, which we shall take a look at now. The Werewolf of Dogdyke. This is a story uncovered by Roger Parsons and is a fascinating account of Lincolnshire's very own werewolf legend. This is what Roger has to say about the story. The story was recorded in 1926, and even today it sends a shiver down my spine. Reading this short tale, I wondered if other Lincolnshire places were said to have been home to such creatures. It was in an archaeological dig that the bones of the creature were found, and a chapter of events was set in motion. Without giving anything away, I would advise my archaeologist colleagues to avoid bringing unidentified bones into the house and leaving them on the kitchen table. The Werewolf of Dogdyke, 1815 to 1864. Legends of the Fendon People as told by Christopher Marlowe, M.A., author of The Fen Country, 1926. Another extraordinary story of transformation was told by a young man who lived in Langrick Fen, not far from Dogdyke. He was an ardent archaeologist, and one day, while digging in the peat, discovered some ancient remains. Among them was what looked like a human skeleton with a wolf's head. Carrying the object into his cottage, he placed it on a table and examined it carefully, but he could not make anything of it, and concluded it must have been some monstrosity, such as showmen bring out at fairs, to excite the interest of the crowds. That night, however, he found himself unable to sleep, and fancying he heard a noise in the back premises, got up to investigate. Suddenly, he heard a sharp rat-tat on the window pane, and looking round, perceived a dark object looking at him. This speedily resolved itself into the form of a human being with a wolf's head. Every feature was distinctly marked, and there was no possibility of reflection, since no light was visible anywhere. As the young man stood transfixed with horror, the creature gave a snarl of savage exultation and raised its arm to dash in the glass, whereupon he recovered the power of movement and fled into the kitchen. A crash sounded behind him, and he wasted no time in locking and barring the door and erecting a barricade of furniture against it. There he waited all night in a cold sweat, while the stealthy pad-pad of feet sounded without. At last the first streaks of dawn told him that his long vigil was over, and as the light grew stronger, he ventured to unbar and open the door. Nothing was visible of the ghostly visitor, but the table whereon he had placed the skeleton was overturned, and the window of the room was shivered into fragments. Hastily collecting the remains of the uncanny being, which lay scattered all over the floor, he buried them again in the same place where he had found them and covered them over with several layers of peat. Nor was he again disturbed, though for many years afterwards he would describe with vivid gesture his peculiar adventure with the supernatural. So thanks again, Kelly. What a story. Really appreciate you sending us that. Reading about it, my first instinct is to agree with the author and say, if you find some bones, don't bring them home. Moreover, it led me to think about it a little bit, and I do wonder what was the creature or the being that this man saw. Was it a spirit? Was it the creature manifesting itself, or was it some kind of protecting spirit or creature? Was it physical or was it spectral? It was certainly physical and smashed up the window and the kitchen, so does that mean it was physical, or was it something in between or that could manifest both ways? I've also been doing a little bit of reading and watching some YouTubes on wolfmen and dogmen, and you might be ahead of me on this, you the viewer, but I'm really starting to appreciate the difference between the dog-headed men of history and of the sightings that come up more recently, and the Wolfmen. And previously, I don't mind admitting, I pretty much lumped everything in the same category, but I'm really starting to see the distinction between them and their behaviours and their history and how they behave. So I definitely will be looking into the Dogmen and the Wolfmen more in future, and of course hopefully there'll be more episodes on those to come. Let me know what you think about this story and the Wolfmen and the Dogmen, or the Dog people and the Wolf people, down in the comments, and let me know your theories. Okay, this next article is on the londoneconomic.com, and the title is "Why Do People Believe in Psychic Powers?" Psychic powers are gradually becoming popular as the world continues to explore different sides of it. Research from 2011 shows that Americans believe in paranormal phenomena, with 55% of them believing in psychics. The psychic sense can be divided into different categories, including clairvoyance, the psychic sense of seeing; clairempathy, the psychic senses of feeling and emotions; claircognizance, the psychic sense of knowing; clairaudience, the psychic sense of hearing; and clairsalience and clairgustance, the psychic senses of smell and taste. Experts believe that there is a difference between a medium and a psychic, even though they sometimes get lumped together. The general rule is that all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. Everyone has a psychic ability of varying levels to be able to acquire information about the past, present or future due to the sixth sense or intuition. A medium, on the other hand, is a psychic that can communicate through two worlds, from spirit, through spirit, to spirit. However, whether it is a psychic or a medium or both, you would get the best experience and results with a good medium or clairvoyant. Who are the believers? A study was done in 2016 on paranormal psychic believers and skeptics that exposed why some people believe in psychics and why some others are skeptical about it. The study shows how this could result from cognitive differences and the different ways in which individuals process information about the world. The differences in analytical thinking and conceptual knowledge is also a contributing factor to whether people believe or not. Most believers are likely to think less analytically, as they often rely on their intuitive power, while skeptics tend to think more analytically and see things from a different perspective. The interest in psychic powers has grown steadily in the last 5 years. During this time, there have been claims of psychics being able to communicate with the dead or with animals, or get messages from the spirits. Psychics tend to explore the possibility of life after death, while they continue to trust their guts and intuition. Considering that anyone can be a psychic if they believe in it and get on the journey, there's the question of whether or not they would replace wellness. Would more people go to psychic mediums for help rather than wellness coaches? From the stories and evidence provided by believers in psychics, there's a possibility of that happening. There are claims of it giving people a better connection to others, while teaching them to be kinder and show more empathy towards others. Conclusion. There have been claims of fakery, forgery and fraudulence over the years, but it hasn't stopped people from believing in it. Believers are strongly convinced in what they believe in and will continue to explore it to seek answers. The existence of scientific research with positive results is also a contributing factor to why more people continue to believe in psychics. So, I was mostly drawn by the fact that on the London Economic, a publication I'm not familiar with but seems rather serious, that there is actually a conversation around psychics, mediums and the abilities in general. The study that was conducted seems to me to confirm the somewhat obvious, that people who think in different ways will perceive things in different ways, and that's kind of a bit duh. people do think in different ways because we've all had different experiences in education, and everything that comes before helps to form the base of our understanding and our worldview. It informs our outlook, it informs our biases, it informs our prejudices, and it informs just how we look at the world. So from that point of view, this study seems to me a little bit unremarkable. It is just interesting that there is money going into it. Where I disagree is that this is some modern phenomena. I mean, psychics and mediums and those abilities have been around and talked about for centuries, many centuries. It's also a little bit frustrating that the study or studies are being done on the people rather than the phenomena itself, because that's where I would like to see science and pseudoscience join up. I would like to see the ability studied more. I also disagree that it says that anyone can be a psychic in this particular article, because that doesn't seem to me to be the case, not just in everyday life at least. I think something that might be interesting to study or to write up about would be to almost do this in reverse. Find someone and analyse their predispositions and their beliefs, and look for someone who's a complete skeptic, well-read, an academic type thinker maybe, agnostic or atheist, and then test if you're going to test and study the people rather than the phenomena, test how they react when they encounter a genuine psychic person or abilities or some kind of medium, spirit medium event. Now, that would be very hard to recreate in a laboratory, and I don't know how you would do that, but perhaps it's even just the perception is that they have seen a ghost or they have met a medium or something comes through. And then study how that affects their outlook over the next days, weeks and months. So, I would imagine someone of that mindset would probably be somewhat dismissive of the abilities or the encounter, and they would probably insist on a brain scan, and they would probably check their diet, and they would probably look for environmental factors and so on and so forth. It would be interesting if you had enough of these people and of the like mind, how many then would shift their perceptions and how many would maintain their original preconceptions and dismiss it altogether versus would be inclined to believe. And if there is an element of deception there, or having a bit of trickery to kind of make them believe in a laboratory setting, we might have to present a spirit or present psychic abilities or whatever in a way that it can be measured and consistent. Obviously, full honesty at the end there. Otherwise, I don't know how you would do it. But I just think that would be interesting to see, if you're going to study the people, how, rather than saying, okay, skeptical people don't believe in psychics, people that trust their intuition are more inclined to, that seems fairly obvious. I think it'd be more interesting to try and do it another way. Anyway, I think it's interesting that it was being studied and it's being written about, but the article doesn't mention another form of what I consider psychic phenomena, or at least I seem to lump it in there, and it's that of deja vu. And it's interesting to me because that's a psychic phenomena that seems to be fleeting, and some people never have it, and I've only had it once in my life for sure. But the difference there is, it's almost like that's an event that's imposed upon you, or it's external to the person. And in my situation, it was actually a shared deja vu, because it happened to me plus one other person that was nearby, and we both remembered the same deja vu. So is deja vu psychic? Is it medium? Is it external? Is it internal? Or is it something else altogether? Let me know what you think of this article of psychics and mediums, the abilities and the people, and deja vu. Tell me in the comments what your theories are. Be very interesting to read those. And we'll move on now to the next article. So for this article, we're on Essex Live News, and the headline is Borley Rectory, the haunted house in Essex where the creepy ghost of a Victorian boy was spotted. And I should say at the outset, Borley Rectory, for anyone who's not familiar, is one of the many locations that is said to be the most haunted in England. So it very often comes up in paranormal literature. Russell Old was just 17 when he first stepped foot onto the haunted grounds of Borley Rectory. He had no idea of the things he would witness on that day 20 years ago and how it would impact the rest of his life. Russell was stood on the grounds of the most haunted house in England, in the rural village of Borley, northwest of Colchester. The location is where tales of ghostly nuns, mysterious voices, and visions of an eerie coach and horses have been spotted over the decades. It was on that cold day at the beginning of the century that Russell spotted the figure of a young boy dressed in Victorian clothing. It all started one day when my uncle asked if I had ever heard of Borley Rectory, the most haunted place in England, Russell explained. We went up there for the day and I brought a couple of mates. As we were driving down the road, you could just felt your arm hairs stick up. I knew I was near it. We drove up to the church and there is a little turning you can sit in front of it. I just remember turning my head and looking towards it and seeing a little boy. He added, I can remember it so well. The little boy looked Victorian. He was wearing this tweed jacket and I could see it so clearly. I looked at my uncle and said, can we go? I don't want to be here. And they had no idea. I said, did you not see it? But that wasn't the only thing that happened that fateful night. After returning to the site later that same evening, even more bizarre things started to happen. We drove back through in the evening and all of a sudden there was a massive thump on the side of the car, the 37-year-old remembered. At that point, we had to stop the car in case we had hit something, but there was nothing. We were panicking, looking around at all the bushes, and there was nothing there. Everybody was really on edge. We got back in the car, and as we approached a turning, my uncle stopped the car. We said, why have you stopped? He said, to let the car go past, but there was no car. He had seen headlights coming towards him, but there was nothing there. Their visit to Borley Rectory that day left an imprint on Russell's mind. It became a place that he would come to visit again, with even more spooky sightings and events happening. And this article then goes on to relay some other stories from Borley Rectory. Borley does seem to be a place of debate and contention. Some of the reported activity, at least, that was said to have happened there was latterly admitted to have been either hoaxed, made up or embellished. And I haven't read about it enough to really know the full story, and if and when I do, it might become a deep dive episode on the channel. But let me know what you think of Borley Rectory in this article, and if you've ever been there and had an experience there, that'd be very interesting for me to read. And I'll move on now to the last article. So this article is on the Daily Mail, and it's called A Fright at the British Museum. The British Museum is home to the largest collection of ancient relics and bones, so it's not surprising that staff and visitors have experienced thousands of eerie happenings. Historian Guy Walters investigates the things that go bump in the night and day. Something is stirring in the British Museum. Throughout the endless galleries, corridors and staircases, locked doors are swinging open, footsteps echo, strange figures are being picked up by security cameras, and things are going bump in the night. For the indomitable staff who patrol the vast site, a night shift can cause a gulp in the throat or worse. Take the time a guard was trying to shut the massive doors of the gallery that houses the eerie Sutton Hoo helmet, thought to have been worn by a mighty 7th century king of East Anglia called Radweld. As he pulled the doors into place, he distinctly felt a wrist and hand emerge from between them, giving him a violent shove to his chest. The poor man flew backwards 2 yards and fell over, a scene witnessed by his supervisor. A tall tale? Mere coincidence? Perhaps. But it has recently emerged that there are scores, if not hundreds, of such ghostly accounts at the British Museum. According to Noah Angle, an author who has been investigating such sightings for several years, the building, which is home to some 8 million items from all over the world, including more than 6,000 human remains, is awash with signs of the paranormal. Even the most level-headed skeptic would find it hard to explain away every single one of the episodes Angell has collected for his book, Ghost Stories of the British Museum. Another story tells of a guard assigned to patrol the galleries in the small hours. He found himself drawn to a particularly enigmatic object, a wooden, two-headed dog studded with iron nails from the late 19th century Congo. For some reason, he became fascinated by the object, said by curators to be a symbol of mediation between the living and the dead, and felt some sort of power emanating from it. The guard lifted his hand and directed it at the dog, at which point every alarm in the gallery went off. Understandably spooked, he told his brother, and when, 2 days later, the two men visited the gallery during normal opening hours and he again pointed at the object, the alarms sounded once more. The story of the mechanical galleon is another tale with no simple earthly explanation. Made in the late 16th century in southern Germany, it is an extraordinary piece of craftsmanship, part automation, part clock, that was featured in the BBC Radio 4 series and book, A History of the World in 100 Objects, by the former director of the British Museum, Neil MacGregor. Angell recounts how one of the museum's information desks was approached by Dutch tourists, who were perplexed by some photographs they had taken of the galleon. They showed me the pictures in sequence, said the member of staff there at the time. So there were all these clocks and watches, and in a couple of the last pictures, there was a face coming out. It was very strange because it looked like it could have been a little girl or a dwarf. It was a funny face, kind of smiling, and it didn't have much hair. The clothes were really strange. They weren't modern. According to Angell, the clothes of the girl or dwarf was wearing were consistent with the period when the galleon was made. So, who is to say that the energy of this being isn't still around, he asks. The north and east stairwells have seen some of the highest volumes of supernatural phenomena, and perhaps it's no surprise to learn that they are at either end of the upper floor of the Egyptian gallery. The room holds many human remains in the form of mummies, which some might feel are not resting in peace. In one disturbing episode, a photograph of a child is taken by tourists in front of a large tableau of hieroglyphics appearing to reveal a large black mass rising out of the floor as if it were about to overwhelm the child. When the visitors showed the picture to the guard, he was said to be tongue-tied. There really does seem to be something otherworldly about the room, as one former member of the Visitors Services team recounted in his own story to Angell. I went up to the Egyptian mummy gallery in the middle of the night, just to check it out and see if things were alright, the supervisor said. I opened up the gallery and it was absolutely freezing, and this was a summer's evening. It was so cold that I could see the breath coming out of my mouth. It was like walking into a freezer. There was also a smell that I couldn't describe. There was an eerie feeling about it and my stomach turned over. It was scary. So I phoned up security and said, "Something's gone wrong up here." By the time his colleague had arrived, the presence had vanished. The Egyptian department also seems to attract people who want to divest themselves of objects that they find creepy. According to Angell, museum quality items have been left by visitors on 3 occasions in 12 years. Once, somebody left the hand of a mummy, he says. There was a note attached to it saying that they had found it among their grandfather's things after he had died, and that it brought them misfortune, and they wanted it properly disposed of. So I think I'll leave it there. This article does go on a little bit longer and does include some photos of the items that were mentioned, which are worth checking out if you're inclined to want to see them after this episode. What I would say is, much like wolf-headed skeletons, I would not advise bringing home mummy parts, and I think that the people that inherited or found the mummy parts probably did the right thing by taking them to the museum. Like you, I would imagine, I'm not surprised to read or hear of supernatural activity taking place at this museum, which houses thousands and thousands of artifacts, relics, bodies and body parts. It would probably be more surprising to me if there was no activity, and it sounds like it would be a great place to go if you're a paranormal investigator. The Dutch tourist story is great, as it sounds like they captured a manifestation. But it's also interesting that it says it could be a little girl dressed in era-appropriate clothes, or it could be a dwarf. So maybe as cool as it sounds, it might just be pareidolia. However, the guard setting off the alarm twice whilst gesturing in the same way towards the dog is very spooky. I like that story. It is a repeated behaviour and outcome, so it's definitely more difficult to just dismiss this as coincidence or something else. I've never been to this museum, but if I ever do so, I'll be going to look for some of these artefacts. Anyway, that's it for this part of the episode and looking through these interesting articles. I now have a few items of housekeeping I want to talk about, so I'll get to that in just a few seconds. In the first Bulletin episode, I rambled on for a bit at the start of the episode before getting to the articles. I was talking about the channel and some of the comments and some of the feedback I'd had. But in the process, I also asked for feedback specifically regarding the bulletins. Susie Q left me a comment and said she likes it when I get on with it. So in this bulletin, I reversed the order and we got down to business first. Susie Q is another regular commenter and friend of the channel, so this is appreciated feedback which I've taken on board, and unless there's any major objections in the comments of this video, I'll look to keep things this way around on any future bulletins. In the last couple of weeks, I have also had some negative comments from a single viewer on some of my older videos that's again related to audio issues. I touched on this briefly in bulletin number 1, but that's not really important because the commenters seemed to be expressing almost great distress and let me know how terrible they found it, and have even unsubscribed from the channel. So I've taken a decision to take down 3 older videos and move them into private mode. I'll have to have a think about whether I re-record these or just leave these in the past. Either way, I mention this in case you've noticed it. I haven't been doing what I've been doing on this channel to cause upset or discomfort, or certainly not trying to, and though there was a bit of sting to it, I'd rather take them down now than have people be put off. I'm self-taught so far as video editing and recording goes, and I know the quality has improved, and I will strive to maintain the higher standards, particularly now I have a better home setup. But that being said, all the other comments in the past few weeks have been overwhelmingly supportive and positive, including this one from Devo Davis. You do fine work, and that's coming from a very picky dude that has worked both as an illustrator and a proofreader. Too many channels make me sad with their attempts at one part of this or another. You really are good. I sincerely don't see how you don't have thousands of subs. I wish you all the best, man. I'll certainly be here. Devo, I wish you all the best too. Thank you ever so much for the comment and for sticking around. I'll do my best to keep up the work, and I hope that in time the audience will grow. For my part, I know I've got to put the work in and keep bringing out content, but I also know I can't rush the work. I have tried to push myself in the past and I find I'm not happy with the output. Usually what goes up on the channel is at the very least the second version that I've worked on, but sometimes I rework and re-record the episodes 4 or 5 times. If you are a fan, then per my usual call to action, you can help push this channel by interacting with the videos, by clicking the like button and leaving a comment. By doing that, you're telling the YouTube algorithm that this video was worth your time to interact with it and me. By subscribing to the channel, you're telling YouTube that you are a fan, and the more people who watch my videos who subscribe again tells the algorithm that this channel is one that's worth promoting to a wider audience. Although I feel like the success so far of this channel is due to a growing core of loyal supporters, actually most people who watch are not subscribers. So if you're new and you've come this far along in this episode, please go ahead and click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so that YouTube will alert you the next time a regularly scheduled episode goes up on the channel. And lastly, if you agree with Devo Davis that this channel deserves a wider audience, you can help by sharing your favourite UK Paranormal Files video or videos with friends or family on social media. And this can be done easily by clicking one of the share icons below the video. Alternatively, you can help spread the word by good old-fashioned word of mouth. So why not let your mum, dad, sisters, brothers, work colleagues and life partners know all about the channel and tell them to come check it out for some compelling content on all things paranormal in and around the UK. Thank you to all my subscribers and to everyone who has left positive feedback in the comments. I hope that for my part I can continue to bring forward content that you will enjoy. Anyway, as always, all that's left for me to say now is, thanks very much for watching.